Welcome to Straight Talk. I decided to give you one of my little fireside chats today. My subject is, we're at a crossroads in the sands of time.
Good day to all. Welcome to Straight Talk with Greg Middleton. My name is Alexandra. With this introduction, here is Greg.
Now, rarely in the history of mankind are we given such a clear-cut line drawn in the sands of time. The choices are very precise and consequential. Such choices face our nation currently today as we live and breathe. The sides are so defined, leaving you with the option to pick either one or the other. One side leads to a certain outcome, and the other to a very totally different one. The outcomes are not the same, nor are they similar. They could never be confused or mistaken for mistaken identity. Now, although I would love to be sitting here talking to you about my favorite subject, which is the love of God for those whom He made, I would love to be sharing with you what the wonderful opportunities that He has given us once we get to know Him. However, the issues at hand here takes a little more precedence. In legal terms, they say time is of essence, of urgency, if you might. We must act now, or the side that takes over might not be the one that you would prefer. Now, once there is a decisive winner, the losing side would have no other option but to go alone. Now, it's no secret that our world is broken into so many little tiny fragments, so much so that it would be very hard to put it back into working order again. Think about this. When the left side of the body wars against the right side of the same body, you get total confusion because the body would be at war with itself. In biblical terms, we say a house divided cannot stand. Now, I would like to think that this chasm only exists right here in America, but upon careful review, it's happening all around the world to various degrees. But I can only speak of any measure of certainty about what happens right here in our orbit. Therefore, my talk today will focus upon where we stand at home as Americans. Now, a few of my most recent talks were revealing the split that we are experiencing regarding racism and bigotry. Now, although that is a very, very deep issue within itself, as it has been for long before this nation was formed, but what we are experiencing today is the beast of a different color. But because of the history of these racism, these clear lines still are incorporated in the underbelly, such as race. Race dictates everything we do. However, the wider brushstroke skews through racial lines on into geopolitical and spiritual ideologies. With that stated, there are some people, more people of a particular race on one side of the divide than the other. In fact, one side uses the motto of making America great again. Now that implies to us to take us back to a time when blacks and other minorities were considered to be inferior to white people. Now currently, that is reflected by more whites being in the Republican Party and more a diverse array of people being on the Democratic side. I didn't make that up. Look it up for yourself if you don't believe me. Google it. In America, we have two primary political parties that govern the people. They're not both to blame with what's going on of the incivility that we see here today. Because I see one party working diligently for the people to get something done to assist us. Currently, that would be the Democrats. But the other party, who seems to be the party of no, the Republicans, It's only blocking any and everything that comes to a vote, regardless of what it might benefit the people. Even though the political environment has fringes on both sides, our current situation reveals issues that are not mutually culpable. Now, this has been a slow-moving time bomb for years, now culminating in the takeover of one party by a very immoral person. I don't make such judgment about this person because he says it all out of his own mouth for us to hear his character, and we can categorize him as to what he says. You can always tell a tree by the fruit that it produces. This man does not even attempt to cover up his bombastic nature. In fact, I think he wears it as a badge of honor. He told us right off the top who he was. He revealed his character and his many followers just as he made an announcement that he was going to run for president. He said it just like he meant it. He wasn't hiding who he was. Yet the Republicans selected him as the leader of their party to represent this nation once elected. The Republican Party, pre-Trump, is no longer the same party. It is now the party of Donald John Trump. The members who used to be conservative have sold their souls hook, line, and sinker to this egotistical, I shouldn't call him a fool, but why do very intelligent people fall for this sort of character as their preferred leader? It's almost beyond belief, beyond reasoning. However, I will share with you my theory that you might find amusing before we end this talk today. Now, from the time when Trump entered the race to become president of our nation, he very clearly identified his nature, his ethics, his lack of morals, his darkened character, and his lack of credulity. He is so grossly unqualified for the position of the commander-in-chief over the most powerful nation on the planet. He is actually a danger to the entire world, considering the amount of power that is placed up under our president's control. Fortunately for us, he is no longer our commander-in-chief. We are finally beginning to see just how dangerous and unqualified he was for the job. Many of us knew this all along about his character, but had no idea how deep that well of immoral character ran. Even his own family members tell us about his narcissistic, egotistical tyrants. He only looks out for himself. If anyone gets between him and what he wants, they become his enemy. That includes his friends, his families, associates, his children, anyone. Now, before I get too far in this message, I want to tease you about my theory of why and how intelligent people would fall for such a trickster. What we are wrestling with is not only flesh and blood, but against principalities, against high powers, against rulers of the darkened side of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Now, those of you who study the Holy Scriptures would know what this power of evil is. But those of you who are ignorant of such things, it may appear to baffle you. Mind-boggling. Being ignorant of such powers make one an unsuspecting mark. This is one of the main reasons why we should really study God's Word. Now, if a dangerous predator was standing behind you, just ready to pounce upon you, and you had no idea that it was behind you, you would be very vulnerable because you have no knowledge. You're ignorant. Now, what I just shared with you would be an analogy of viewing things from the spiritual, unseen world. However, viewing it from the seen world, as we do from day to day, There's another explanation that I also will attempt to share my analysis with you. Now, if you are not aware of spiritual powers that I just explained, and yet you still cannot understand why intelligent people will choose to follow the tricks and lies that are coming from such an immoral person, then you must understand that when people are vulnerable to such dark powers and do not resist them, they become open receptacles of such forces. Now apply this theory to Donald Trump, who only seeks attention and high praise to substantiate his value. He craves attention. He has no restraints as to where or who it comes from. But because of this, he becomes a perfect mark for the dark forces of evil. He invites them to come in through open doors with no restraints. Now, people without restrictions become carriers of such dark powers and forces. Now, that would explain why Trump acts as he does. But why would others, who are otherwise very intelligent people, accept what he dishes out? You know, I find this most amusing. Our society has been breached by forces of evil coming through pride-filled people who either knowingly or unknowingly allow this power of evil to come in without much resistance. Now, once the power is in, the power itself is very persuasive beyond human logic. Now, this is because it belongs to the dark side of the spiritual kingdom. Such principalities are far more powerful than we mortal human beings are. Therefore, the power of persuasion that has effects upon us is beyond our reasoning. This is the power that causes many to submit intentionally or not. But once you're stung by that power, it becomes your desire. In the same manner, once you have developed a taste for something that you like, it compels you to want more. In that same manner, we are attracted to sin. Why? Because it feels good to us. To resist what feels good is a task that requires very strong willpower. But if you do not resist, then the power, it penetrates even deeper in through your heart, soul, and mind. At one point, it requires deeper expansion to rid yourself of the attraction. This entails using the power of a higher authority, meaning God. Now, this explains why smart people would fall for the things that are not in their own best interest. But yet, there's another level we should address here. Take those who follow people like Trump. He's not the only one. They do so because they like what he offers, not because they lack resistance. Trump has figured out what people want to hear, so he feeds them a full dose of what they want to hear. He doesn't care what the consequences are for them, for our country, nor for anything or anyone. Trump only cares about Trump. In essence, you will have like-minded forces coming together under one accord. Both are trapped under the spell of evil powers from the dark side. Now take a moment, if you will, to digest what I just mentioned, if you would. In the meanwhile, please allow me to bring this subject a little closer to home in a way that you might be able to better understand. In this case, I will just use myself as a guinea pig. Now, I fully confess that I am a sinner, which means I do things that go against the commandments of God and His precepts. And why do I do things knowing that they are wrong? Well, I do so because I like them. I could blame the powers from the dark side, but blaming alone does not correct my problem. It only magnifies the problem and drives it deeper in the inside of me. But knowing my weakness to sin, I must rely upon a power that is greater than the power that causes me to sin in the first place, against my own willpower. Now, at one point, God has to do the work for me by breaking that stronghold that binds me. He does for me that which I cannot do for myself using my only willpower. In fact, what is impossible for mankind to achieve is entirely possible with God. Our God has no restriction that keeps him from doing anything, whatever he desires, as long as it is for good and righteous reasons that follow his divine will. Now you might be thinking, what does this have to do with followers of ungodly and unrighteous people? It is the same power that binds us all. We are all sinners. What man could save us from ourselves? Am I any better than any other person who sins? No. The only difference is I seek God's help. Not all people desire him. Now this brings me back to my topic. We are at a crossroads in the sand of time that requires us to make a decision. We are the people who must decide. Nobody else is going to come and do it. Since God gave us free will, it was so we can make our decision. Now, I could share my solution with you, but not all people are on the same accord, worship the same God. Not everybody recognizes the same almighty power. So since we're all so fragmented, we must find ways to come together with some kind of mutual understanding. One that has mutual benefits for us all. Now, what is it that is good for us all? What kind of things can we agree with? Now, realistically, we know that all people will never agree upon all things. Therefore, what would be a winning strategy for us to adopt? Now, if you say, let's use the majority rule to determine the winners and losers, how has that worked out for the minority so far? The rich and powerful overrides those who do not have power. They do so because they have the power to get away with it regardless as to whether it's right, decent, kind, or loving. This is why we are in this predicament today. We're at a crossroads in the sands of time. Now that I've laid out the problem in a way that you might be able to understand it clearly, how can we, the people, those who wish to find solutions, come up with something that leads us toward any degree of success? We know that Rome wasn't built in a single day, so we must be patient with each other as we attempt to make things better. But keep in mind, not all people seek peace or pursue it. Some actually prefer chaos and bitterness. And there's very little we can do with such kinds of people. Christ told us to just move on, shake the dust off of your sandals, and move on to those who are somewhat receptive of his truth. In reality, we cannot solve the world's bitterness. At best, we can barely control our own selves. That means if you are for God, then you must take a stand for him. He says to us that we are either for or against God. Those are his words, not mine. So in that case, we must allow the cards to fall where they may. Remember, we did not create the world and all there is within it, but guess what? God did. So, let us do our best and leave the rest in his most capable hands. So now that concludes my prepared words, but I just want to bring us up to date. Currently, we have been facing what's these shooting after shooting after shooting, week after week after week, several in a day at times. What is that telling us? I mean, as Americans, are we just going to sit back and allow all these wicked people to control and terrorize us and our lives when we have the power of God already living within us? God says, I have put in you a power that is greater than all of this garbage in the world. So why are we so timid? Do you think we just roll over and let the wicked people have this planet? Not on my watch. Now, do you have God inside of you? Does that God compel you to do something about what you see? Or are you just willing to just stick your head in the ground and just let it pass over? Now, I think about what God has done for those whom he calls his children. If you are in God, God is in you. You have more power than you realize. So why are we waiting? I'm not trying to put the blame on Donald Trump. I'm not trying to put the blame on the Republican Party. As I said earlier, we're facing powers that are not from this world. They're from the dark side of the spiritual kingdom. But with that in mind, I don't think we have the ability to fix what has been broken. I think the power to fix whatever this is rests in God alone. Which means we are the human vessels down here. And we have to let God go through these vessels to achieve his good works. Now, I'm not a person who likes to place judgment on too many people or blame on people, because I think at one point we have to determine that if something is wrong, it might be up to us to do something about it. Why else would you know something is wrong? And guess what? It was probably God who told you something was wrong. So I just want to put an appeal out to us ordinary citizens, us people who believe in some sort of faith or trust in an almighty power that we call God. Can we just come together? I hate to say it like Rodney King, but can't we just get along? Who benefits from all this strife? Who benefits from tearing us apart? Are these people seeking power to that degree that they're willing to do anything despite of what it does to the people? Now, can you really call those godly people? I've heard them say they do. They claim to be fighting for the right of life, but they want to hurry up and get you born so they can shoot you with all their many guns. Now, I hate to mix my political self with my spiritual self, because it might confuse you. It might make me sound like an angry person, which I am angry, and I should be. God got mad. He wants to destroy the whole world in the days of Noah. But we are to get anger, but not sin. So I have to hold myself back. So rather than me blaming other people for my demise, I can do something about it. I can go out and love my neighbor. I can encourage you to love your neighbor. I can teach my kids to respect people. We all have a hand in this, so why don't we all come together and do what is right, not only for God's sake, but for our own sake too? I bid you all peace, love, and happiness, and I say this all: to Almighty God be the glory. Selah.